In Shateman's section on inspiration, it says, "The more you ask, the more you learn. The best way to inspire others is to make them feel heard or valued." Lincoln truly was an inspirational man, and this is evident very early on in the movie. One of the best examples was the scene towards the very beginning when he is talking to the soldiers at their camps. We see that there are 2 black soldiers and 2 white. It is evident that they have faith in Lincoln to turn the war around and bring back peace, but the most influential source of inspiration was his speech, the Gettysburg Address. It is evident that many people believed in him simply by the speech, and seeing the soldiers recite his own speech back to Lincoln was proof that Lincoln was truly setting an example and inspiring others. Lincoln listened to those soldiers, as he did with many others in the film, and he always made sure they felt heard. He was genuine and he wanted to know about others. So now I'm quickly going to go over Shateman's power as influence. For the first being reward power, I found that Lincoln always set a strong example of reward power. I found that he was always patting others on the back and letting them know that their work was always appreciated. Coercive power. While I'm not sure about a specific character example of this, I found that in the House of Representatives there was always many issues of coercive power. People were sometimes easily influenced or even punished for believing in a certain thing or making certain decisions. Legitimate power. I felt that both Lincoln and Thaddeus were both examples of this. Lincoln already had such a heavy title of president that no matter what he did, people were obliged to do what he said. And as for Thaddeus, we know that he was an old man and had been doing his job for quite a while. He automatically had power because of his age and assumed wisdom, not to mention that he was very fearful and in your face. And for expert power, going back to what I said about Thaddeus, he automatically influenced others because of his knowledge and experience within the political system. And referent power. Lincoln may not have had respect from everyone, but because of those who did follow and respect him, he was always able to influence others. This is simply because other people showed that they trusted and admired him. Lincoln was a great example of using these steps to change. He always challenged how things needed to be done. As for the 13th Amendment, Lincoln wanted to make sure that it was passed before the war was over. Although some felt that it should wait, he knew that if they waited to pass it, then with the war being over, it would never pass. Lincoln was always looking for resources and opportunities. While trying to pass the amendment, he knew that he would need more votes, and him and his team went and found and persuaded those to help pass the amendment. I felt that no matter what move Lincoln made, it was always a risk. Because of the time during the war, each decision that Lincoln had to make was incredibly risky and could alter the outcome of the war and the amendment. Going back to the passing of the amendment, Lincoln knew that he absolutely needed to get it passed before the war's end or else it would never happen. Lincoln had no choice but to involve others in his plans. He knew that he had to work with the right people in order to get what he wanted to be done. The topic of momentum seems to fit this particular movie. Much strategy is used when it comes to many politicians in slowing down or speeding up the war and even the passing of the 13th Amendment. Lincoln constantly was strategizing and making sure that certain things happened at the right time. Momentum can be a positive or a negative. If the momentum is going at a steady pace, then the leader can end up looking better or worse depending on the subject or outcome. As for the followers, momentum can also affect them depending on the feedback the leader gets from the situation. Momentum isn't easy to start, but once it begins, the process becomes easier. Because of how powerful momentum is, it can easily change situations, such as the changing of the votes for the 13th Amendment. And of course, momentum cannot happen unless the leader starts it first. Some questions to ask oneself as a leader is, what is required, what gives the greatest return, and what brings the greatest reward? Lincoln knew that the amendment would be beneficial for certain reasons. He knew that if the amendment was not passed before war's end, then slavery would continue on and the amendment would not have a chance of passing any time after. Lincoln knew that the process he took would be the greatest outcome. As for Lincoln's son, Robert, he was battling the issue of enlisting in war. He knew he had to enlist for the sake of his country and for the memory of his brother. He knew what was required of him and was prepared for the job. As for sacrifice, Lincoln seemed to be accustomed to it. Any strong and dedicated leader will have to sacrifice something important to themselves. Lincoln in particular sacrificed many personal things. We could see from the film that he was a family man, but in order to fully lead his country, he gave up his time with his wife, kids, and self. While he still showed his dedication to his youngest son, it was evident that he gave up sleep and time to spend with his family in order to keep his head right with political affairs. But he always knew that once all the heavy politics were over, he could go back to how things were. The sacrifice was also evident in the extreme aging in his face and body after a couple of years. Okay, so here are some of my aha moments and overall thoughts. First of all, just about the movie, I was expecting this movie to be incredibly epic just because of the amount of awards and whatnot that people had won, like Sally Field and Daniel Day-Lewis. I really expected so much more out of this movie, especially since I really love this time in history. It's literally my favorite part of history is the Civil War and the time when Lincoln was in charge. Um, but I really did not like the movie. I found myself falling asleep multiple times, and it wasn't until the last like 45 minutes or so that I really got into it. I didn't realize how political it was going to be, even though, of course, it's about Lincoln. I guess I just expected a whole lot more out of this movie. One thing I didn't like was Sally Field's role of Mary Todd Lincoln. Um, I know that in history she's actually much, much, much younger than Lincoln, so I was not happy with the fact that she was the same age or even looked older a lot of times than he did. And I also knew she was a lot crazier. Like, I expected her to be a little bit more mental and whatnot than she was portrayed in the film. Historically, that's just what I know. Um, One part that I thought was crazy, and I don't know if this is true or not, I should probably research it, was the part when Thaddeus Stevens at the end, when the amendment was passed, brought the bill home to, I guess it was technically considered his like maid or servant, but then he got in bed with her. And that was like almost mind blowing because this whole time he was kind of going back and forth with the votes, and in reality, he just wanted to make life better for himself so that he can, be with a woman that he wasn't supposed to be. I thought that was awesome. Um, and then the other part that I loved probably the most about the film was the ending, the part at Ford's Theater, and I thought it was so cool just because I had been there before. I had seen the theater. I had also seen the bed that Lincoln died in, and the pillow is still stained with blood. I love the way that they filmed it. I love that they didn't just show him getting shot and it being, this dramatic thing. I loved that it was all about his son and his son losing his father. I thought that was, an incredible way to show the emotion in the film. Um, but overall, those are really the best moments that I had. It was really difficult for me to keep track of all the different people in the film, so that's why I didn't really talk that much about different people. I didn't know who anyone was, and I kept getting everybody mixed up and all the politicians mixed up, and I kept getting confused of who was who because everyone really looked the same, and there's so many men in the movie, which kind of bothered me, but I understand. Um, but yeah, so those are my thoughts and my moments, and I hope you enjoyed my video.